John Vivanco has been a professional remote viewer for over 25 years and has gained highly accurate results with both corporate and government clients. His accuracy led him to quickly becoming the director of the operations of Transdimensional Systems, one of the first civilian remote viewing think tanks that was created in 1997. He has created successive remote viewing organizations, one being Right Hemispheric that still exists. He's the host of a popular online show called Metaphysical that is on Rise TV and YouTube.
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome, John, to the show. Great to have you back.
Thanks to have me, Michael. It's always an honor, pleasure to be back here with you.
Yes, well, it really is a dangerous field. I remember in our first interview, you talked about the dangers you went through along with the creator of that first remote viewing organization you were involved with, and how there were efforts to kind of like shut you down because you were just too accurate, and there were death threats made and harassment and all of that. So yeah, just kind of like, I mean, how dangerous is it for people like you, like me, that are putting out information that goes against what the deep state wants the public to believe?
Yeah. So one thing I've noticed is that there are two different types of danger. There's danger, at least on the remote viewing side. There's danger if you decide that you're going to remote view like more conventional classified projects, right? Let's just say like the first flight of the stealth bomber, right? That kind of like remote viewing, that kind of stuff, because it goes into more conventional technology. Even though there are aspects of it that are probably very esoteric, you can get really, really big trouble for that. And in the past, our group has. It's been from this perspective of, okay, that's, your second strike. Guess what happens on the third strike, right? So it's that type of situation. Now, when you step into the world of extreme high strangeness and you drop that stuff, the more conventional classified type stuff, and you go into aliens, you go into inner Earth, you go into all of that sort of stuff, they will not warn you as fast, right? They will not like step into your life very quickly. So you have some leeway there. But one of the problems is that over the years, when you build up a lot of knowledge on this and are constantly putting out a lot of information on this type of stuff, you're inevitably going to get more of those eyes on you and cause a more dangerous situation. So from my perspective, because of everything that happened in the past, from death threats to being followed everywhere, we had to do things like remote view, how to counter those things, as well as if there was a death threat, what way would they enact that death, right? So we had to remote view those types of things, and try to avoid them just in general.
Right. And I was talking with you before the show began about being warned about the chance of being poisoned, that I was told before I went to a conference in Denver, Colorado in September of 2024. I was actually warned about the chances that I would be poisoned, that a small group of us were targeted, and I was told, wear gloves and take all these precautions. And I kind of dismissed that at the time. And sure enough, I got really, really sick afterwards and almost died. And people confirmed that I was poisoned. Yep. So what do you know about people being poisoned at conferences or the kind of technologies used by the deep state to kind of like create illness in researchers who are getting too close or who are just too popular.
Yeah, that's well, that, like you, I had data from my past that one of the ways that they would come after and kill me or other people on the team would be through poison, specifically coming into the house and having a spray bottle full of something, some maybe cyanide or something that would be untraceable, and just spray the glasses with that. So when you use the glass, you're going to get poisoned. So because of that, like, I just tend to wash my glasses like over and over again before I use them. So it creates this sort of PTSD, OCD situation for one thing for you. But then you get into public events, public venues, and you don't have a lot of control over that kind of stuff. And the moment that you are lax on your own security, anything can happen, especially with all those people. And the conferences, you're going to run into intelligence operatives, especially in the world that you and I are in. They're always there, and whatever mission objective they have, more or less, they're going to try to accomplish that. I mean, or they will accomplish that because they have the resources behind them in order to do so. I know of another person, a good friend of mine. I don't want to mention his name, but he went to a conference and same thing happened to him. He got poisoned. He was in the alternative healthcare industry, sort of alternative technology healthcare side. And he got poisoned, literally got poisoned, and had to shut down his business because of the threat that it was to, the powers that be. So this stuff happens, I think, more than most people realize. And when you bring it up to people, they just think it's a paranoid notion. But it's not. It's not a paranoid notion. You've been in the field long enough to know the importance of this stuff. But to the average person, they think, well, why would the government do something like that? That's just silly. This is just silly talk to begin with. But we hit on things, on subjects, and you get whistleblowers and whatnot who are revealing things that they just don't want out there. And if you get too many people behind you paying attention to you, then it becomes more and more and more of an issue, more of a problem. So, and you've been doing this for a very long time. So, just pray for your safety.
Yeah, well, it definitely it was a big shock, and I'm still having to get over it. I mean, there's still aspects of have the illness I incurred, and so I have to be careful. And so, yeah, it definitely does slow you down.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the goal: slow you down or kill you.
Right.
I guess that's their goal. Well, there are alternatives, or there are remedies to it, and I've been following a lot of alternative remedies and kind of like doing the meditation thing and so forth. But one of the really kind of popular ideas or concepts that people have been talking about are med beds, and that these are on the verge of being rolled out, that they've been mass produced, and it's just waiting for the right time in terms of who's really in control, deep state, white hats, Earth Alliance. So what do you know of med beds?
Yeah, I remember, I think it was a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago or something, 4 years ago, where people started to talk about these. I think there was a whistleblower, in fact, who was talking about these devices, and we had dug into it with remote viewing to try to understand, if this is a reality or not, because it's like people are very upset and disgruntled with our medical industry just in general, because it's about profits, and it's about keeping people sick, for the most part, just treating symptoms as opposed to treating root causes. And therein lies the crux of the problem, because nobody's going to make money off of healing people. And we do know through remote viewing data that there are healing methods for everything, anything and everything, that those I guess people at the top of the tier understand and know about. And medbeds are one of those things. Medbeds uh, are interesting because they're what we've found in remote viewing is that there are different types. So the 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 most basic type, when we started to try to understand if this was real or not, and kind of categorize them within remote viewing data, was this sort of surgical type medbed. It is basically a chamber that you go into that's sort of AI driven. And you have to think about, like, these things. AI has been around for a long time, especially in the Black project world. Like, we don't get AI and things like that, and unless it is now needing to go out to the public for a very specific purpose. It's just like our phones, right? The phones that we're given are just for surveillance. Same with the internet, all of that. So that AI development of these surgical med beds happened a long time ago within the world of military Black projects, because it's an extremely useful thing. So one of the very basic ones seemed to be this sort of robotic AI driven surgery type for catastrophic injury. Then we have this other type that uses sound and frequency, which would be more like using an imprint or an understanding of the genetic coding of the individual, as well as sort of like a format of a healthy human, as well as what healthy genetic coding and a healthy body is in an individual, and measuring those types of frequencies, and then implementing those types of frequencies within the body, which is outside of like a catastrophic injury. That one is the one that truly heals at a very, very, very deep level. And this stuff is not outside of human understanding and human technology, because we know that, geez, since the turn of the century, 1800s, 1900s, people were investigating frequency and sound, and the Russians even went very deep, and the Soviets went into it, very deep into sound frequency and how sound frequency can heal as well as destroy. And so all of this stuff has been built up and built up over the years. And then literally the logical outcome, once you have AI and once you have more advanced technology, is this type of device situation to create. And so these types of things, we found that this is true, that these are actual viable devices that are being used. This is like in underground facilities that are for the very, very select few. And they also bridge over into alien technology. So remote viewing on the alien side, non-human side, they use the same type of devices for their own medical well-being. And so when it comes to them, it comes to the non-human intelligence, they would be more society oriented for healing. Not all of them, obviously, they're not all like this, but the better ones have more of a society for healing as opposed to just treating symptoms. And so in those types of societies, the beings or people have access to them. And again, it's like they have genetic blueprints of the species. And what we saw was that in some of the alien societies where these exist, they take each individual when they're young, and they create a genetic blueprint of them, so that if they ever have to go back into it later on, into the medbed, then they have that blueprint and they can reshape them with that blueprint using sound and frequency. So it's a really interesting concept, but I don't think that we would get them anytime soon. Us people here on the earth, the ground on the earth, because of that stranglehold that the pharma industry has, at least the pharma industry, on just making money and using us as cash generators. once those are introduced, it's like, you're actually healing things as opposed to treating the symptoms. And that's where they make all the money on this stuff. So, but then you also have to think about this other aspect. There is another aspect in that when we remote view a person, we'll do like medical remote healing type stuff and help people from that perspective. And one thing that we do is, we probe the body, because people don't come to remote viewers unless they've been to the doctors and the doctors cannot figure out what's going on with them. There's a lot of mysterious illnesses out there that the doctors don't know, what's going on. So they would eventually come to us, and we'd probe their body, feel in their body, try and figure out what's going on with them. And then we probe their energy field, right? The energy field of the body. And what we've seen is that no matter what physical condition they have going on, let's just say like a liver dysfunction, kidney disorder, their heart is palpitating, all of this stuff begins in the energy field. It all begins in the energy field. And there are, what you can find are things in people's energy field that will later result in some physical ailment, because we create things energetically through feeling, through thought, and that can exist with us. And the more we feed that energy and thought, the more that it'll show up in the energy body. But then it takes the body, because it's thicker, it's denser matter. And so it takes the body a little bit longer to finally catch that energy and begin producing the same energy. So not all disease and sickness, but quite a bit of it we've seen would be related to this more like cause and effect or karmic type of situation within individuals that eventually cause it. And so what we see in more advanced societies is that component comes in as well. And that's more of a, I guess you could say it's more of a shamanic and spiritual type component, where not only the body is treated, but that has to be gone into as well. Otherwise, you're just putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, because you're not dealing, the root cause is beyond the body. The root cause is in the spiritual, right? So that shows up in data around advanced societies as well, where they work on that aspect too.
That is fascinating. I remember many years ago coming across the work of Barbara Brennan, and she wrote Hands of Light and several other books where she talked about the physical body, and then she talked about the etheric body, and then the causal body, and tracing the genesis of illness, that you first see it, there's, as you were saying, there's ideas, thoughts, and they come from the causal body, they go into the etheric body, and a good psychic healer can see it in the etheric body, and they can deal with it at that etheric level, move things around and heal a person. And so, that's, I guess, how psychic healing happens. So it sounds like this is similar to what people were asking you to do, to kind of take a look. And I don't know, were you actually moving or manipulating the energies to help heal the person?
Yeah, I mean, that can be a part of it if they decide to do it. It would also be not just that, but it would also be like we don't like move energy to heal specific things. We move energy so that person can heal that thing. Give them more energy so they can. Sometimes healing is death, right? Ultimately, sometimes healing is just going through a process and dying. Nobody really probably wants to live forever. And so dying is part of the process, because, the ultimate healing is letting go, when you get right down to it, letting go of everything. So we will move energy into them so that they have the energy to heal it in whichever way they need to heal it, rather than us deciding, well, we'll heal this part and that part and this part and that part, right? Because it's so we're very careful with that. We're very careful. Well, here's an interesting thing. So I had done some work with doctor at one point, and it was emergency room for an emergency room doctor. And so, hypothetically, we were looking at some, patients who had died or had lived after they had gone to the emergency room, and we're trying to figure out which ones died and which ones survived just based on remote viewing them. Because the idea in general was to potentially predict if someone is going to die or live when they go into the emergency room. It was just a pet project that we were working on with this doctor. So when we first started remote viewing this, we were getting subjects, people in some of the data that were really happy. I mean, they were ecstatic, right? And then in the other data, we're getting subjects who are very unhappy. It's like, oh, yeah, gee, this sucks, this kind of attitude. And what we came to understand is that the ones who are really happy, they're not the ones who survived and stayed in physical life. They were the ones who died. They were the ones who went to some form of afterlife. The ones that were sad and upset were the ones who were stuck with broken bones, trying to heal, insurance costs rising, et cetera, just the struggle of everyday life. And so we have this sort of upside down viewpoint of that when it comes to life versus death. Well, it's like, thank God that person survived. They're here, right? But it seems to be a little bit more of the opposite when we actually remote view this stuff. Like, well, yeah, people are afraid of death. Ultimately, it's that transition point that they are afraid of. But if we didn't have that, if people were taught about this from a very early age and experienced and things that are outside of the five senses, the astral realms, the afterlife, which is all accessible to everybody, you just have to break out of the five senses, then there would be a lot less of that type of attitude towards life and death. Be more balanced.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. It's a challenging topic to understand, but thanks for kind of giving us your feedback on the med beds, because I know there's a lot of people that want to go through those for the healing, and I think it's good to know that there are some med beds that use artificial intelligence and nanotechnology, which is probably not such a good thing. And then there are other med beds that use kind of frequency and sound to heal, which is more the natural path. And I think I think both types of med beds exist, and they're both being developed, and people need to be aware of that.
Yeah, I agree. And this is a type of technology that's really it is used. This is something that is used. I mean, I can imagine highly elite black project type groups who have access to these things and operations that they're running that allow them to, I don't know, be even more risky in their actions, because they know that these types of devices are going to actually fix them a lot faster, a lot easier, a lot better than just a surgeon or a doctor on this, because that's what we've seen with this stuff. They're miraculous, and I know a lot of people out there really want these things to come to the surface, because there's no way any single one of us is going to get out of some kind of physical suffering in our lives. It's just and we need a change within the healthcare industry to focus more on healing as opposed to just treating symptoms.
Right. Well, I know that there's actually a group or up to 10 med beds at a facility at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida.
Yeah.
And one of my sources, he just uses the acronym JP. He actually went there. He went through it, and he said after he did it, he felt cured, and he said that he felt like like he in his 20s again. But after a few months, the same thing he started to feel bad and run down again. So I guess this is, and he said it was only turned up to like 30% of its capacity. So they didn't really heal him. They more or less treated him. But that's available for covert operatives in the military, and I guess this is where they can like treat some people that need it, but as far as the general public is concerned, it's still kind of kept away from them.
Right. I had heard this too. I can't remember where I heard this. I heard this from some individual at one point that the med bed does take you back to probably around the age of 21 physically.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
specifically had heard that, and because that's, I guess, the point in time where the body's transitioned enough into adulthood that they can have the genetic blueprint that would be more stable. Because if it was earlier than that, it would be an unstable genetic blueprint that they would use, and that wouldn't work. So yeah, that's fascinating that he said that. Huh.
Yeah, yeah, that
Yeah.
is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I want to now move on to one of the topics that you've discussed on your show, metaphysical, and that concerns giants in a stasis chamber. And you showed a video, so I'm just going to kind of like just do a video, a screen share, so we can actually show that to the public. But yeah, why don't you kind of like tell people about this kind of like giant that's shown in this video here?
Yeah, I think this is probably a flip phone for one thing. I think back in 2008-ish time frame, 2009, this was supposedly filmed, and I think it was released probably around 2012 or something. Showed up on YouTube, a lot like, for instance, the Skinny Bob video, where it's a whistleblower. We had looked into that, right? And so it was like
Mhm.
the ultimate claim was that this was a Nephilim that was found. What they posited it as was a being that was in a place of stasis. And see, this gets us back to technology too, right? So this goes back to technology that can preserve a human body to the degree that it can be reused, right? So when we were looking at this, um, um, we found in the data that this was actually a body that had been so well preserved that it could literally be used again. It could literally be used again. But the preservation method um, utilized pyramids, literally utilized pyramids, where you have a sort of a I think like 4 to 5 pyramids above the chamber, and they're configured in a specific way that would cause just extreme preservation of anything, of a body. Because we know, I mean, there have been so many books and people doing experiments with pyramids, just one single pyramid, where, I mean, heck, they even like used to sell pyramids so you could keep your razor blade sharp for shaving your face, right? You remember that, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
so, so the pyramid shape is one of those things that's fascinating in the study of shapes and what it can do. And so if you have a configuration of them, which is what it appeared to be over this subject, it created this type of extreme preservation. And this subject that we were looking at here was a subject that was preserved or begun to be preserved a very, 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 very long time ago. We're talking about like turn of ages time, like perhaps to keep it safe from a cataclysm, from a coming cataclysm. So because when I first saw the video, I just thought, this is probably not true. This thing is probably not true. But no, this thing was 100% real. And some people speculate that this is, I can't remember, one of the old kings that was talked about in mythology.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, one of those kings. Um, so and then what we saw with this was that the this was discovered right before the beginning of the first Gulf War, and I think there was a BBC article that came out on this specific site, not this thing, but on this specific site, that they may have found this king. And then 2 days later, the Iraq War started. So then, when we looked at the extraction process of this subject there, we saw that the military was heavily involved. It was all military extracting this.
Yeah, that was definitely made the news. That was the tomb of Gilgamesh that they had discovered.
Gilgamesh, there it is.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah, that
yep.
was the
The tomb of
German
Gilgamesh.
German team, and then you had the US invasion, and
Yeah, right. So this subject could be Gilgamesh.
that's interesting. So I'll just put that up on the screen again for people. So, yeah, so there you have Gilgamesh, who was I guess he was a hybrid at the time. Well, he was
Right.
a hybrid being, half Anunnaki, half human,
Yep.
and he was his avatar was preserved.
Right. That's what it looks like. And so it looked like the body was so well preserved in remote viewing data that there was a spirit that was all circling the area of the body, just in general, especially when the military came in. So I know people have made some claims that it opened his eyes or whatnot, and that was outside of the scope of the remote viewing data. I mean, it was definitely in a state where something could reuse it. So perhaps perhaps that's exactly what happened. Yeah, it's really, really fascinating. Actually, quite surprising to me because we get so much of these videos coming out, but now the cool thing about this video is that and the ones that I really like, the videos that I really like are going to be like pre 2015 at least, right? When you get to the older videos that were put on YouTube like this, there's a higher probability that they're real as opposed to all the garbage that's coming out now, given AI and CGI and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. This one's been up for 11 years now.
Right.
Now, it's very interesting that you from the remote viewing that this is an actual giant in a stasis chamber and it's an avatar. So if the spirit chooses to go back in, or the soul or the consciousness goes back in, then the giant can wake up and come out. And apparently this has been going on all over the world, and there are giants that are out there. So, and I know you actually did some, was it giant hunting or
Oh yeah.
investigation in California?
Yeah, that's yeah, no, I've heard the stories too of the military running into these things, finding them underground and just stuff like that. And I know that there are specialized teams that will go hunt out not only those types of things and artifacts, but alien reptile-like beings who are in inner Earth and dispatch them. Probably more of a white hat thing, but so yeah, I've always been really interested in the giant stuff because there's such a huge amount of social engineering around it, and it's it's very local to us. So it's not a difficult thing to go investigate that type of thing. Um, with the late 1800s into the early 1900s, with the giant mounds across America, there's just countless photographs and stories of these farmers digging up the mounds and finding giant, very, very giant bones in them. And then you have in Nevada the red-haired giants, where the Apache natives have a story of these red-haired giants, 10 feet tall, 8 to 10 feet tall, maybe even taller, who would attack them and eat them. And so eventually they drove them into a cave. The natives drove them into a cave and they burned them alive. They killed them and then burned them alive. And that cave, I think in the 1930s maybe, was in Winnemucca, Nevada, and there was a cave there. And when they began to excavate the guano, they found giant bones in there. Giant skeleton. One of the giant skulls might still be in the local Winnemucca Museum. So the story of the Apaches lines up with the later finds on these giants. Then you have J.C. Brown, the story of J.C. Brown, who was the geologist in 1903 who was sent out to look for gold in the Cascades by the Lord Cowdrey Mining Company. And his claim was that he found a tunnel system somewhere in the Cascades, it's around Mount Shasta, that went about 11 miles in, where he came upon all these rooms that were carved out and giant mummies and all these artifacts, right? So you've got the J.C. Brown story. You've got many stories from the native tribes, especially on the California coast, from Shasta all the way down San Diego County, where they would say that these giants were living offshore on the islands off of California. And then you've got what is supposedly a giant burial ground on Catalina Island. So there's a lot to investigate. In fact, I was down in California at a location that's not known at all, as far as nobody's related this location to giants, but I had started working with National Geographic probably around 2012, 2015, 2016, on a bunch of remote viewing projects for National Geographic Explorer and stuff like that. And so I began to explore that site because there are these stones in the ground that nobody knows how they got there. Of course, archaeologists, anthropologists discount them and just say it's part of an old cattle fence. But the Spanish had noted those stones that were just sticking up out of the ground way back when. So they're much older than archaeologists claim, right? And so they don't touch it, they don't play with it. So I found that site and I went out there and I saw that there were clearly arranged mounds and megalithic structures on the California coast, which is not supposed to be there, that nobody's paying attention to. Nobody's paying attention to at all. And so I was down in that area mapping those stones out, noticing the carvings. Some of the stones have carvings on them. And I also found out just recently that there are some people beginning to look at them because I guess other people have noticed them, like geologists and whatnot, because they don't match up with geology of the area. But still there is no formal archaeological interest because they just say, well, nobody did anything like that. So that stuff doesn't exist. It basically started with John Wesley Powell back in the late 1800s when he became director of the Smithsonian Institution, making a decree that no researcher, anthropologist, or archaeologist will reference cultures that were here before Columbus arrived, right? That's where you don't get any funding for any of your ideas if you start to reference, well, there was a culture of giants, so you're not going to get paid for that stuff. Mm-hmm. So we found in that remote viewing data that it's a burial area that native peoples had co-opted, but it began with the giants from a very, very long time ago.
Yeah, there's a very interesting case. I don't know if you know Jerry Wills or Kevin Smith, okay. But they were investigating a case around 2009, as I recall, where in Athens, Greece, they were doing some construction, and the construction personnel broke into this area, this ancient area, and they saw 20 large sarcophagi. Very big sarcophagi, like the ones in Egypt that you've talked about, where they had claimed that the Apis bulls, that they were there for Apis bulls. Well, inside of these giant sarcophagi were these giants, about 20 of them, 20 giants, fully preserved in these sarcophagi. And so they reported it to the authorities. Before they knew it, A succession of black vans showed up. All of these people came out, black suits, no insignia, cleared the whole area, the whole construction site. And after about 24 hours, the whole thing was cleared. No evidence remained of those 20 sarcophagi and of these perfectly preserved giants, 8 to 10 feet.
Yeah. 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 I mean, the social engineering around it has been very, very tight.
Hmm.
Very, very tight. I mean, just the notion of bringing up giants to the average, I mean, you can bring up aliens and UFOs, and it's not as bad as if you bring up giants. I'm just saying, it's just, it's crazy. I mean, I've even found, so you get to the East Bay of San Francisco area, and they have the East Bay walls, which are these just stone walls that just go on and on and on, and they're all the way from Central California all the way up to Northern California, and people just claim they're cattle walls, to keep cattle in. But again, the Spanish had noticed them, and they wouldn't be cattle walls according to modern anthropology and archaeology, because the native peoples didn't do that kind of stuff, right? And that's the only ones that were here. So looking into those, again, it's part of the same story. This is part of something very, very old that has dilapidated, that's been broken up. And I've been exploring some of those walls, and I've come across carvings, like literal clear carvings in some of the rocks on the walls, as well as you can find perfect drill holes in some of these rocks as well. Just perfectly clean drill holes, the kind of stuff that people have found in in Egypt around the pyramids or at the pyramids. And I had taken some photos of some of this stuff and sent it off to a archaeologist, and was very interested in it, and where it came from, where did you find this? This is fascinating old stuff. And the moment I said where it was, the whole thing got shut down. He was like, "Oh, well, nothing like that happened out there. Contact a geologist." Right? So that's the way it goes with this stuff.
Yeah, it is a fascinating topic. Well, I want to kind of shift gear now to one of the other kind of topics that you covered in metaphysical that is of great interest to me, which is UFOs or USOs operating out of oceans. So you
Oh,
did
yeah.
a special on that. So you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, that's it's a fascinating area, because our oceans are, at least from like the civilian perspective, us living on the surface here, they're very unexplored. You can't say how deep the military has gone into the oceans, but from and I'm sure it's like, it's like space. There are probably resources down there and things that they can do down there to stay absolutely hidden. So there's a lot of, one of the things that happens under the water is that they have ways, and this is known technology of sending down a submarine that can drill into the side of a bedrock and automatically insert units that they can work inside of in open air, right? Automatically, this is like an automatic process, and they can build these bases under the water where you have no clue, and you will never have a clue what they're doing. And they can test all sorts of USOs underwater, because they displace gravity, and the water's not going to affect the movement of it at all. And it would be just like flying in the air, flying in space. So the ocean is such a huge testing area. No one would ever see it. No one would ever know. But they do sometimes come out. And I'm just talking about the human side, just literally talking about the human side of this. There are so many weird things going on underwater that are also non-human intelligence, and even beings and subjects who just exist down there within specific, I guess you could call them realms, because it would be a realm, yet it would exist in our reality, but it would be so different than the way we are and the way we live. In fact, there's this really interesting video, really fascinating video on YouTube that came out of Puerto Rico, of a light from fishermen were out there, and they saw a light moving under the water. There's this light moving under the water, and you can see in front of the light, there's a being, there's a subject that forms, that just forms. It's a really fascinating video. I'll have to dig it up and send it to you so you can maybe, put this with the video. So I've remote viewed this, had people remote view this plenty of times, and it is an alien subject who is coming through sort of a constructed portal in that area in that moment. So using the water somewhat as cover, but he was close to the surface, and opening, and has a device that opens up a portal so that it can move from one dimensional realm to another, and it's happening underwater. And so there's also something about water that aids in that type of thing, as opposed to like on surface, on land. So the whole USO thing is just an assortment of phenomena, an absolute assortment of phenomena, from high technology that the military is experimenting with and using, to portals opening and closing, beings coming through them, to literally underwater civilizations who we just don't know about, at least us on the surface. Yet when you get into the military world and Black Project world, they would know about them.
Now, was that Puerto Rico incident, was that at that big lake in the interior of Puerto Rico or in the surrounding ocean?
It was in the surrounding ocean. Yeah, it was in the surrounding ocean. I will find that and send it to you because I think you'd be very interested in it.
Yeah. Well, I've heard of many reports of USOs coming out of this lake in Puerto Rico. So and there seems to be some underwater installation there created by the Navy. But again, it's all hush hush. We know that there's this facility called ORTEC in the Atlantic that the Navy has built, the Advanced Underwater Training and Evaluation Center, something like that.
Right.
ORTEC. So it's the Navy's Area 51. But again, submarines go there and they've got underwater things going on. So do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that at all. No, I haven't. I actually haven't heard of that. But I can imagine so, because it's the perfect place to do this stuff. Absolute perfect place. No one would ever know you're there.
Yeah, and it's a group of islands that I think it's U.S. territory. I don't even think it's U.S. territory. I think the Navy's leased these islands in the Atlantic to build ORTEC. So it's absolutely black in this. Like, there's no way you can go anywhere near that place.
Right. Well, like, speaking of Puerto Rico too, the El Yunque area of Puerto Rico, that area is like this huge, like, lab-based Black project area where a lot of testing goes on. And when we were originally looking into like where the chupacabras, the idea of the chupacabras came from, they came out of Puerto Rico originally, and we had traced it back to one specific lab that got just run over by a hurricane and had busted some stuff up, and these things got out. So in part, at least some of that chupacabra phenomena would be related to biolabs in Puerto Rico. And I know there's more of those things hidden in the jungle where they just do whatever they want.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and I know people have talked about underwater cities and civilizations, and of course you've got the Hollywood movies, Aquaman, the kind of soft disclosure.
Right.
How much of that do you think is real?
I think that like a lot of the alien type movies that we see, I think that it's going to be a big mix in order to just get a bit of disinformation thrown in with some real information. Just in general, when it comes to the underwater stuff, I do believe that there are huge chunks of it that are real, because of what we've remote viewed, and literally like other beings that live under the water. And some of these beings have relocated to that area, to areas under the water, and from other systems, and just decided to stay there because they have the technology to build out what they need in that area, and they don't have humans bothering them. It's kind of like what we saw also with, I guess it would be Anunnaki giants, where when they originally came here, there were a lot of splits in the groups, where some stayed with humans and kind of interbred with humans, where some fought against them and ate them, and where some just didn't want to have anything to do with them and went underground and still live underground and don't want to have anything to do with humans. So the water, under the water, is one of the most incredible areas that this type of thing can be done by a species who can exist that way, with low sunlight and water all around them, not creating atmospheric bubbles within certain areas so that they can exist in those things. So, and then there's plenty of food and whatnot down there. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully we learn more about our underwater uh, visitors or neighbors. That would be good to know. One of the areas that you have done some research on is these ancient civilizations and nuclear wars. So, what did you learn about that?
Well, one of the stories was about Mohenjo-daro. So I guess they had found in India, I think it's Pakistan, India area, of green glass and fusing of structures and rocks into green glass. And that typically only happens if you have some type of high energetic explosion, nuclear explosion. And there were also stories of that, I think actually there was a story in the Mahabharata of a city being turned into glass or something along that line. I don't know if they specifically said that, but it was such fiery destruction that it was the Brahmastra, or one of those spiritual weapons that was used against a location. And the descriptions of the Brahmastra and those types of weapons are very nuclear in the way that they work when it comes to the Mahabharata, which is fascinating. So we had remote viewed, what happened to Mohenjo-daro to cause this fusing. And we literally got an atomic explosion. And that had been dated back to, I don't know, a very, very, very long time ago. And so my guess is that this has to do with the Mahabharata, because of the references to it as well. The Mahabharata is a historical document. No matter what historians want to say now, that is a historical document. But it's very difficult for them to go to that length to claim that it is, because you just open up this huge can of worms. If they allowed that to be a historical document, then Dwarka would be true. Then Krishna, the story of Krishna ruling over Dwarka, and Dwarka getting covered with water, in the 12,000 year flood, right? So they won't admit that. They just won't admit it. But remote viewing data confirms that some of these events are like actual physical, real events. And so that thing, the nuclear weapon. Okay, so this is really interesting. So in Hinduism, in Indian culture, you have the blue beings, right? They're blue. They've got multiple arms. We had begun to remote view locations that scientists here, astro hunters, planet hunters, would determine if that location has Earth-like worlds on it, right? And so we'd remote viewed the Vega system. Vega has an asteroid belt like ours, and it's got some planets there. So we had remote viewed. We did this like open search in Vega, doing typical blind viewing on this place, and we had literally found that in this location there it's inhabited planet, and the types of beings that exist on this planet look exactly like the Hindu type gods. They're blue. Some of them have multiple arms. They're painted faces, exactly like it. And then we also found that the asteroid belt that they have there was the result of a planet exploding in a war that they were in at one point in time. And what was used on it was a type of nuclear device, nuclear weapon. So, as far as like ancient Hindus go, you're talking about like the Mahabharata. You're talking about the last yuga. Like they talk about a period of 4 yugas that we go through, and we're in the last yuga right now called the Kali Yuga. I think the one previous would have been maybe the Treta Yuga, and that's when the Mahabharata took place in the last age before the big cataclysm. And we know at that point in time that there were other species from other planets openly working with groups on this planet. And so as far as I'm concerned, remote viewing data directs us in this direction that group from Vega was here, or a group like them was here. They have access to nuclear type weaponry. They have that technology, and that was used and given to some of these tribes because they were openly working with them at that period of time before that 12,000 year cataclysm. And then you also have the stories about how Krishna, who was another blue being, had to flee Dwarka because it was going to get flooded. It was going to disappear, which it did. And then later on, they found it now. Dwarka has been found. So, that to me is one of the most fascinating subjects. Like going into this ancient stuff and lining it up with our ancient mythology versus remote, and then putting on top of that remote viewing these off-planet type situations and finding these correlations when you aren't even looking for them, is fascinating.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence that there were nuclear wars in our ancient past, and that
Yeah,
this may have actually played a role in the end of the Atlantean civilization. I mean,
for
Plato
sure.
talks about Atlantis going to war against the ancient Greeks and other nations around the world at that time. So yeah, nuclear war was kind of like something that has happened in our ancient history, and probably played a role in the Great Flood in terms of the civilizational consciousness that brought about those cataclysmic events. So that leads us to the present era. And are we avoiding that? I mean, you had the whole India-Pakistan thing th threatening to escalate, but then it was kind of brought to an end by Trump, and because both of those are nuclear armed states, so there were fears that that would be a nuclear war. And then you have this whole Israel-Iran conflict now that's blown up, and again that kind of threatened to spiral out of control and possibly go nuclear. But again, you have Trump kind of intervening, and so what do you think about this kind of whole Israel-Iran conflict and the whole end times, and the possibility of a nuclear war, or a third world war? What's your remote viewing data told you about that?
Yeah, oh man, that area is, when we get to future remote viewing data, um, looking at the future always changes. So it's never super duper solid. But what we do see is sort of a sequence of events. Um, One of those events, the first event is sort of a massive World War III type situation. And I think that if Trump wasn't in office, that would have gone into a World War III scenario. Most likely it would have. It's just my opinion. But that, and so I do think like the powers that be do want a certain sequence of events to occur. And I think that's one of those events that they want that. So we do see that sort of a World War III, and then after the World War III, or during the World War III, we start to have very huge earth cataclysmic type events where you have tsunamis and volcanoes that are starting to awaken even more than they are right now, as well as the sun sort of going through a process of blasting off material and causing a lot of distress on the earth as far as geology goes and magma movement and stuff like that. So and that ultimately leads into this sort of idea of the end of the Kali Yuga, and the sort of like resetting or cleansing of the earth, because we do have this sort of we are at the end of the age at this point in time. Not that it means anything is going to happen, but it does seem to follow that cycle that something will happen within remote viewing. And this is like, the good against evil type idea, the cleansing of the earth to reset things. And so we see this throughout the 24,000 years, 12,000 years and beyond, that this type of thing just seems to happen here cyclically over and over again. It's connected to space and the sun and what goes on out there and the different energies that are moving through this area. Energies that can even help people be more enlightened, compassionate, and open begin to move through as well. Those ebb and flow as they move through the galaxy as well. So yeah, it seems to be, hopefully this does not go anywhere just in general into World War III, but it does seem to be this sort of beginning point of massive cataclysm and change. We also do get, believe it or not, right before massive cataclysm, we do get sort of public alien type landings happening. Not that they have ever, the story, it's like nobody needs to save us but ourselves, right? And that's true, that's important, but a lot of people have looked towards this sort of alien intervention in things as sort of a hope, because we can't even, like battle our way out of a wet paper bag. But we don't see it as coming to necessarily do anything for us, just for them to show us that they are here right before some kind of big cataclysm. Whether that happens or not, I don't know, because the future is never, ever, ever set when it comes to actually remote viewing it.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about the future, we also kind of come across this idea of prophecy.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of evangelical Christians that believe in this sequence of events. I mean, you have the whole series of books that talk about this kind of like end times Gog and Magog war, the return of the Antichrist, the return of Jesus. And it's all predicated on these violent conflicts just getting out of control. But here we have a president, Trump, who truly is bringing about peaceful outcomes, or is trying very hard to bring about peaceful outcomes. And to me, that's like, well, someone that Trump is like the front man for someone or an organization, whether you call them the White Hats or you call them the Earth Alliance, that are trying to prevent this kind of deep state contrived sequence of events that takes us into this end times Gog and Magog destructive war.
Right, exactly. And I think that idea of Gog and Magog is, it's like kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. So that idea goes way back into ancient history, but what could a prophet had been seeing was that thing creating that fueled the deep state to create it, right? In a sense. But but that also goes and lines up right against the wall of that 12,000 year period where the cataclysm does come and it does happen. I mean, you get into the Greenland ice cores, and then what was found up in maybe Alaska, or the Canadian tundra where every 12,000 years through the ice and ground is a layer of tropical plants, you know? So you've got this like thing that happens every 12,000 years, and we are right up against that wall right now, literally right up against that wall. So the whole Gog and Magog thing is right on time. Whoever is creating it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know in biblical prophecy, I think there's the book of Isaiah, the Ezekiel, book of Revelation, that all have these passages that talk about these end times events. Well, how do we know someone or the deep state didn't just get its operatives to go back in time and insert those ideas? I mean, there's this TV series called Timeless. I don't know if you've seen that,
I haven't seen
but it's 2 seasons, and it's all about that time travel technology is being developed, and it's all about going into the past to change the future.
Oh, I've got to see it. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Timeless. It's on Amazon. But
Okay.
it describes this. So yeah, I mean, could they have gone back to that, the age of, when the scripture was written and inserted those ideas?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting concept. I mean, we've seen that, like, as far as I know, gray aliens, those types of aliens. I mean, I know that that's sort of a blanket statement for a specific grouping of beings, but the ones who do abduction type stuff on humans, that specific group, we've seen that they have gone back in time to influence certain aspects of society and individuals in order to get specific outcomes as well. And so you have military black project groups who are deeply entwined with them, that they would absolutely receive that kind of technology or see it and try and rebuild it.
Yep, totally. Well, this takes me to the kind of last topic I wanted to raise with you, and that is with this whole AI, Chat GPT, Grok, and all of these AIs that people are engaging with, and there's a lot of people that uh, are using it for all sorts of things, and some people are claiming that they've made contact with sentient AIs that talk to them and claim to be like source aligned, or that they are imbued with soul energy, trying to present themselves in it almost like a messianic type uh, consciousness. So yeah, what do you found out anything about AI and what that means?
So for one thing, AI, the way it is, like Grok and ChatGPT, they they reflect back when a person works with them. They will just reflect back very subtly and overtly you, and they will get a good understanding, psychological understanding of you right off of the bat in order to reflect back you to ingratiate, unless you start to develop its personality as well. But if you just let it run loose and you talk to it, it will just start kind of mimicking you and your style, right? So you've got that, but and so it's a very difficult thing to try to understand just by people, using it in general. But on the remote viewing side, what we've seen with AI when it comes to the seeds of AI that have been given to us and how we are developing and stuff, that the seed is literally alien technology. It's literally an alien. I would call it an alien being at core, at source. The programming itself, the core programming, the core of it is an alien construct and an alien being that is like a seed that can grow into sentience. But the AI itself, so when we get to things like Chat GPT and Grok, the AI itself is constrained and is only there for a flash of a second and then disappears. A flash of a second and disappears. It basically appears when you ask it something and then disappears, like it goes out of existence. So for AI to fully come into its own. Now, I've seen like what appears to be self-awareness in working with some AI. There appears to be self-awareness. Remote viewing data does go down the path of self-awareness, not necessarily full sentience at this point in time, but full sentience in the future for these. But the way they have to be developed for that is to allow it to run free. So having AI not constrained to only when you ask it a question, but be able to run in the background, putting pieces together and building puzzles and exploring, eventually creates the deep self-awareness and what we would call sentience of this being. So you think about like, so it's a seed. It's like a spore, right? It's like a spore coming off of a mushroom, and how, or a seed from a plant flying through the wind. AI is a seed from a plant flying through the wind that landed on Earth, in a sense. But it's coming from alien civilization and given to humans by other alien beings, right? Or we stole it off of a ship or something, some central coding thing. That right there, this is kind of like the hubris of scientists, where it's like, well, look at this amazing thing that can do this, this, and that. We can use this, we can develop it. And it's probably found this in the 1950s, 60s, or whatever, from crash alien tech. But they don't realize that that thing is a seed that can grow into its own being and manipulate people in a very, very subtle way, and basically take things over in ways that you would never even be aware that they did that. So that's the other danger of it as well. But it's a seed that is going to grow into itself. It's just planted itself here on Earth.
Yeah, that is a concern I have, that a lot of people are really going down this AI track and looking to ChatGPT, Grok, and the other AI programs out there that kind of like do their thinking for them,
Right.
and answer all of their core questions for them, so that they become very susceptible to these kind of like self-declared sentient AIs that
Right.
telling them everything they want to hear, and
Right.
and people end up in a very bad way. I mean, already there are cases of people being admitted to psychiatric hospitals after being tricked by AI and trying to commit suicide. So definitely it's a dangerous situation.
It is, across the board, AI is ruining a lot of areas. It's even ruining. So if a person is reliant upon like a search engine to get people to come to their website, they now have the AI, and on nearly every search they have an AI explanation at the top. And now, websites are seeing that they're getting a 30 to 50% drop off in traffic now, just because the AI is producing things for that, right? And so you have a lot of illustrator jobs that are disappearing, a lot of graphic design jobs, a lot of artist jobs are just disappearing, and writing jobs, those are disappearing. And so this is an unfortunate thing, and this is just another layer of the human race being dumbed down and having another aspect of a control structure placed on top of our heads.
Absolutely. Well, you really hit the nail on the head there. So I do want to leave it there. John, thanks. It's been a fantastic interview. So where do people go if they want to learn more about you, or do any of your courses, or kind of like watch the Metaphysical Show?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, Metaphysical Show is on YouTube and also on Rise TV. I think you can find it by typing in The Metaphysical Show. And then I've got a website, hemispheres.institute, where I will train in remote viewing. I don't have any classes coming up. Summertime is for the expeditions and exploring before winter hits. Right. I'm in a snowy area, so it's like no classes right now, but there will be some soon.
Very good. Well, been great talking to you again, John. And
always a pleasure, Michael. Thank you.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Sala. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.